Hi everyone, I'm glad you're here because today's episode is a doozy. Today I have 3 stories that nearly shattered everyone involved as they tried to rationalize what happened to them. Just wait until you hear what you're about to hear. So if you're enjoying the channel, don't be invisible. Let us know you're out there and smash that subscribe button so we can always be together. Thanks. Now let's get into the stories. I was working for the Wisconsin DNR when I was sent out to investigate a wild deer with potential chronic wasting disease. It had been reported on the eastern section of the Ice Age Trail. It's a pretty popular trail in the state, so I was told to find the deer quickly and dispatch of it if it had any signs of CWD. 3 different hikers had reported it over the last week, all around the same area. All of the reports said the deer was malnourished, severely injured, and smelled of infection. This description didn't necessarily lead me to believe it was a case of CWD. The more likely cause was an injury that had become gangrene. Either way, the deer likely needed to be humanely dispatched. The section of trail the deer was reported on was difficult to access with a vehicle, so I ended up needing to hike in. The deer was reported to be hanging out near one of the public shelters, with the last sighting being less than a full day ago. If the deer was in as bad a shape as the witnesses claimed, I didn't expect it to have gotten far, even if it was still alive. I reached the shelter just as a storm began to roll in, which was odd. I didn't see any evidence of rain on the weather forecast that morning, but it looked like it was going to get ugly. I looked around quickly for the deer, but the rain started to fall heavily, and I decided to wait it out in the shelter. The shelters in this area of the park are more like little cabins. They are used often by backpackers who are through hiking, so it wasn't an unpleasant place to wait out the storm. Just as soon as I took off my backpack and sat down, I was overcome by the stench of rotting flesh. It came out of nowhere, and it was so strong that I was nearly gagging. I looked around the interior of the shelter to see if I could find the source. I thought I saw something move past the doorway, but when I peeked outside, there was nothing but rain. The stench then disappeared as quickly as it had arrived. There was no explanation for it. I tried to eat one of the granola bars I had packed, but I just couldn't find my appetite. The rain was pelting the shelter and spraying in through the open doorway. I tried to check the weather forecast on my phone, but there was no service. I waited in the shelter for maybe another 30 minutes. The storm hadn't let up, but the stench suddenly returned. I didn't know what was going on, but I knew there was something terribly wrong. I can't explain how I knew, I just knew. And then I heard something scrape against the side of the shelter. It was loud, even with the rain outside. I looked out through the window and I saw what looked to be white antlers. Now that didn't make any sense at all. It was early summer here in Wisconsin, and bucks don't start growing their antlers until much later in the season. And even if, for some reason, they were early, they would still be covered in felt. I figured this must be the injured deer, and it certainly smelled like it was on death's door. I tried to get a better look out the window, but the animal appeared to be moving towards the door of the shelter. Whatever it was, I was about to see it soon enough. I couldn't shake the feeling, though, that there was something off about this whole situation. There was something more to this injured deer. I knew that much, but I didn't know exactly what it was. I had the gun I packed in to dispatch this deer. I pointed it at the door, and I waited. The doorway was dark because of the storm outside, but I could still see well enough to know that the creature that walked into view wasn't an old, injured deer. It was about twice the size of a whitetail, and its body was absolutely skeletal. I could have counted its ribs even without the rain soaking the beast. Its fur was long and stringy like the kind of long hair you would find on a dog, and parts of it were missing its fur completely. But that's not the worst part. Its head was a skull. No hair, no skin, just bone with the antlers attached. And I didn't see any eyes in its sockets, but like I said, it was dark. I could see it had a tongue in its jaw, and its teeth looked like those of a deer. The lower jaw didn't appear to be hanging on by much, and I don't know what the thing was. I gave it about 10 seconds standing there in that dark, rain-soaked doorway before I fired at it. I hit that beast 3 times center mass, and it ran away. It literally ran away like it had been scared or something. Not like it had just been blasted with a shotgun, because it didn't fall down, and it didn't even falter a step. It just ran. I waited another hour for the storm to pass before hiking out of there. I had never been so scared in my life. If a shotgun couldn't stop it, there was nothing I could do if I ran into it again. I can't tell you how relieved I was when I finally reached my truck. I had no idea what to report to my boss either. I told him that there was something terribly wrong with the deer and that it was something I had never seen before. Also that I had shot at it 3 times and it acted like it was nothing. No one believed me. I ended up leaving that position in 6 months for a desk job, and I never, ever go hiking alone anymore. I know you get a lot of letters from park rangers, and I never thought I would be one of them, but I'm writing this anyway. I don't work in a big national park, but that doesn't mean that I don't have my fair share of adventures. And this story is definitely not the kind of story you tell to family around the dinner table. Like a lot of people who work as park rangers, I love the outdoors. I don't want to be under a roof. I want to be out, hiking, trail clearing, whatever. I work at Henry W. Coe State Park, an 87,000-acre reserve in Northern California. It's a big place full of relatively unspoiled wilderness and gorgeous scenery. We have fishing, hunting, and even equestrian campgrounds if you want to bring your horse. The park is what you would call rugged. In fact, some of the more adventurous hiking loops are steep enough that you need to be in great shape to make it all the way through. Naturally, maintaining the trails is important, and checking trail conditions can take a long time. Typically, we do our routine patrols alone, but there are times and places where we go in pairs. Since I've been on the job for a while, I usually have one of the more junior park rangers with me. It's nice because I like showing them some of the spots only a longtime ranger could know. We don't talk about it much, but there are a few places in Henry Coe Park that, well, they have a history. Actually, a lot of the park has a history, but it's not generally known. This is one. The park staff calls it Hangman's Hill, and it's not just a scenic overlook with an interesting name. That title was earned because the tree at the top was used to execute more than one outlaw during California's Wild West days. Since Hangman's Hill is a popular hiking destination, the trail and the area see more use than most. We regularly patrol and check the trail conditions to make sure that they're as safe as possible. I was out on patrol with Oliver, one of the newest park rangers. We were hiking the long loop up to Hangman's Hill. It starts out easy, but the middle section gets steep and rough, and even the best hikers need to take breaks. We did a little trail maintenance along the way, making sure that trash was picked up. It always amazes me that people can't leave the wilderness the way they found it. There were a few places where there were deeper ruts in the dirt, like something had been digging in the trail, but we filled those in. The day was perfect for hiking, clear blue sky, annoyingly bright sunshine, and the weather was a crisp 73 degrees. Oliver and I made good time as we progressed up the trail. We passed a few hikers, but apparently Hangman's Hill wasn't popular that day. That was fine by me. We had been getting some complaints about downed tree limbs up there, and the last thing I wanted to do was deal with the public while I was trying to hack up a giant branch. At the halfway point, when the trail gets steep enough that you're climbing rather than hiking, we took a breather and I casually asked Oliver whether he had been up this trail before. He hadn't. This was always the awkward part of breaking in a new park ranger because it can go one of two ways. I can warn them, nothing happens, and they think I'm being a jerk and complain to our supervisor, or they don't believe me, and if something does happen, I have to deal with a terrified coworker who complains to our supervisor. So over protein bars, I ask Oliver if he's ever even heard of Hangman's Hill. He said he hasn't. I think, well, this is going to be fun. So I casually mention that the site has a lot of history behind it. Desperados, horse rustlers, claim jumpers, and classic Wild West justice. There was even an infamous pair of brothers who were hanged up there. I don't lay it on too thick, I just tell it like a historical lecture. And I can tell that Oliver is taking it in like classroom information. I don't think that it'll last long, but I guess it depends on the hill. So the hike up to the crest of Hangman's Hill takes another hour. And the minute we get close to the site, I can tell it's going to be a rough visit. The bright sun that's been making me squint even though I'm wearing sunglasses, and my uniform hat is strangely cool and dim. There's a breeze moving through the pines at the perimeter of the hill. The perimeter, not the hilltop itself. The hanging tree is the only thing at the top, and it stands at the center of the hill. Nothing but grass grows around it. No flowers, no scrub, just weedy grass that's so tough it doesn't care about what else is up there. The tree itself is completely bare. Bark beetles got to it decades ago, and a burned-out hollow at the base shows that it's been struck by lightning at least once. Most of the tree limbs are long gone, except for one. The one branch that still exists is thick, and it juts out far to the right. It's about 12 feet off the ground. Perfect height for a hangman's noose. Going up to Hangman's Hill is never a good time, but there is a job to do. I point out the deadfall and broken branches from the last windstorm in the stand of pine trees, and Oliver and I get to work. I give him credit for keeping his cool, but I also wonder how long it will take before he notices that, aside from the strangely loud sound of our saws, there is no sound at the top of the hill. No birdsong, no wind, not pine branches knocking together in the breeze. The fact that I can feel a breeze but not hear it, it's a bad sign number 2. We finish cutting the deadfall into manageable logs and we stack them off to the side, and that's when Oliver really looks at the hanging tree. He asks me why we don't cut it down. It's dead. I'm all set to give him the "it's a historical marker" talk when the wind we can't hear shifts, blowing right past the tree. I smell the unmistakable, sick, sweet stink of rot and decay, even though there isn't anything dead that I can see. All of a sudden, I feel a blast of wind rush up the hilltop, and there's sound again. Men swearing, the deep grunts of neighing of horses. The crack of gunshot bounces all around us, and both of us hit the ground out of a reflex. Oliver's looking around for the shooter. I'm looking at the tree. There's something on it. Or, well, 2 somethings. 2 black, ragged shapes, heads tilted at unnatural angles, twisting in the wind as they dangle from the thick black rope slung over the single long branch. The wind shifts to bring the stink of whiskey and body odor right into our faces, and there's a huge, horrible feeling of pressure, like we're in the eye of the storm, and the sunlight goes so pale that it might as well not be there. I manage to tell Oliver that we're done. Time to head out. I dig into my pack for the emergency bottle of whiskey I carry when I have to come up here, and I roll it toward the hanging tree. Oliver and I slide back over the edge of the hill and we scramble down the slope. We don't talk for a long time. When we get back to the ranger station, I open up my desk drawer for another bottle of whiskey, and I offer him some. He shakes his head. When I come in the next day, I hear that Oliver has put in for a transfer. Me, I'm still here. After all, somebody has to keep Hangman Hill's ghosts supplied with whiskey. I don't know exactly what I saw. It was all just one big blur, and the more I think about it, the more questions I end up with. It was a cold winter night. The ground had a decent amount of snow on it. At the time, I was one of those park cops, the kind that you would see on horses in the movies. Only I had a small vehicle. We didn't ride horses. I patrolled a wooded area near the East Coast, and a lot of times the worst we would come across were just some teens kissing, making out, things like that. That was usually our eventful night, busting kids for being too promiscuous. But the snow was out, and when the snow is out, the teens aren't as interested in being out. But I was doing my nightly due diligence, checking to make sure that the park was running properly, and that no one was lighting fires and things like that. Sometimes the homeless would set up a small spot where they could sit around a fire. I wish I could allow it. They deserve the warmth too, but we can't have anybody accidentally burning down trees or anything. So that's where I have to get involved. My first responsibility is human safety. After that, it's plant safety. That's what I like to think. Anyway, the snow wasn't falling anymore when this happened. It had stopped, and the snow on the ground was starting to freeze. It was a bit tough to move through, though, since the plows hadn't gone through the main roads yet. That meant the small roads weren't cleaned up at all, and it was just frigid. I have to admit, I was getting a little carsick from the bumpy ride. We weren't allowed to smoke in the park area, so I have this weird little area down by a waste management facility where I would go for a break. We have access to some of the dumpsters outside their enclosure, and the road and the little area that they are on isn't really owned by anybody. Sometimes we do find squatters hanging out there, but that night it was empty. I was just taking my smoke break, catching my balance, just taking it easy. It was weird how silent it was, like so quiet, but it was nice. I liked it. Then again, it was also kind of creepy. Anyway, I was smoking my cigarette and rubbing my hands together to try to get the blood moving when I heard some movement in the shrubs off to the side. It wasn't unusual, but it wigged me out a little because it had been so quiet. So I'm watching this bush. It wiggles a bit, but then it stops. Could have been a chipmunk or something, but it was pretty cold outside. Okay, I told myself, no biggie. I finish my cigarette, put it out, throw it in the dumpster, and get back in my vehicle. Then I start circling the area. Eventually, I come along a part of the road again, but a little further up towards some trees. Now, this area is dimly lit. Like I said, sometimes squatters come and they use the area. It is a great place to hide out if that's what you're trying to do. But then I noticed something very small and close to the ground. I didn't spot it at first. The snow was very white, and this thing was very pale too. At first, I thought it might have just been a plastic bag moving in the wind, but then I realized how round it was. It looked like a ball that you might play with in gym class. Just a plain, weird ball, kind of like a tether ball. It was weird though because those balls are pretty hefty, but this thing was moving around in a way that wasn't like that. The wind couldn't be moving it. So I start to wonder if maybe somebody's moving the ball around and they're sitting under the tree. It's possible, but not likely. And that's when the thing moved more. Like, I watched it. I watched as this ball grew a torso and arms, and it kind of propped itself up. And now it no longer looked like a ball, it looked like a large, round head on this tiny, frail body. It was creepy as all get out, but I thought maybe it could be a kid, baby left in the snow. So I stop my car and I get out. I move slowly towards the tree, and when I went to look for this kid, it wasn't there. It disappeared. But the weird thing was that the spot where it had been standing had been disturbed. So something was sitting in that spot, but was now gone. The other weird thing was that there weren't any footsteps around. I couldn't have followed its trail. So it pretty much just poof, went away into thin air. I walked around for some time and I radioed my supervisor. I started a whole search team for this endangered kid. I really thought somebody was in danger, but we never found them. And after that, I kind of lost my credibility. I was honest though. I told them that I saw this weird, possibly malnourished small child in the snow. And when I went to help this child, it had disappeared. I guess I can see why nobody believed me, but I didn't think that I would be labeled as crazy. I'd been a good deputy, and I had always had the best intentions of the park and everybody in it. I know I'm not crazy. I'm not. I saw something that night, and I'm not really sure what I saw, but I know it was something that, to me, looked like it needed help. I'll help anybody. Really, anybody. It was freaky looking, but it looked cold and kind of sick, too. I'm still kind of worried about that thing that I saw. What if it was a kid, but now it's gone because I didn't save it? That crosses my mind from time to time, even though there are no missing children in the area. But I remind myself that I did what I could. I looked for it. My intention was good. It really was.